Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our continued coverage of the FIDE World Cup 2021. We will be taking a look at rounds 2 in the open and the women's section today, and today was a super dramatic day. Before we get into that though, I just want you all to know, I signed for 1 year now with G Fuel, and for the next 5 days, you can get anything G Fuel related, 30% off. There's a link in the description, use the promo code Gotham, you all know how it works. I gotta plug them in like the first minute, so I gotta get that in right now. Now, before we get into the games today and the stories, Levon Ranyan did not show up to his game because he has a fever, so I'm sending him all the best wishes, and I know the community does as well. Hopefully he's not testing positive for coronavirus. Also, we had this happen. This was Alireza Firouzja performing what is I can only imagine is some sort of chess summoning jutsu prior to his game with his opponent, as they couldn't figure out exactly how they wanted to shake hands. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. Now, we have one more bit of drama to get to, and that, folks, is this game between Fabiano Caruana and Susanto Megaranto. By the way, the flags are there and the titles are there. JD Cannon from chess.com helped me figure out how to do that. And I asked him if he wanted to plug anything because I would shout him out. So there's a link in the description to a charity that's very close to his heart. That's how I figured I would pay him back. But now we have flags, so thank you to him. Now, this game was relatively tame. It was in Italian. It was h6 by Megaranto, preventing anything from coming to g5. And then he played g6 and bishop g7. They both castled kingside. And on move 15 of this game, after the first clash occurred with d4 in the center, and we had cd4, bishop d7. The game was stopped. The broadcast was stopped. Neither player was at their board. And it turns out that Susanto Megaranto from Indonesia had received a positive coronavirus test in the middle of the game. Obviously, he is forfeited. Obviously, Fabiano Caruana is now being isolated. So much to unpack here. Number one, why are players receiving test results in the middle of a round? How is it possible that they were not all tested prior and the results were known? That's number one. Number two, Fabiano Caruana is not wearing a mask. Okay, there are other players not wearing masks. There are some players wearing masks. There are some players not wearing masks. I can only imagine that the regulation is the fact that you need to prove that you have been vaccinated before you don't wear a mask, right? That's only logical. But it still means that there are players in the event with masks that have not received the vaccine. I don't think that everybody's vaccinated. So if there's one person testing positive, I don't know what this means for the entire event. I'm just here to report the facts. Craziness, absolute craziness. Now, we had other games. Sasha Martinovic from Croatia playing against Magnus Carlsen. It's also Sasha's birthday, so happy birthday to him. Now you gotta play the GOAT. I was just trying to make a noise. That's actually kind of funny. Anyway, Magnus has the black pieces. What is he gonna play? I mean, Martinovic is strong GM, 2600 GM. Magnus Carlsen is arguably the greatest chess player in human history. So where is that level difference between GM and Magnus? Well, he plays a Grunfeld. Okay. Takes, and bishop d2. I was very happy to see this. The point of bishop d2 is to play e4, so for example, like this, and get this position. And then maybe play d5 and trade bishops. I really like this. This is one of the weapons that I have against the Grunfeld. And here Magnus Carlsen played a move seen in like 20 games. I mean, in this position, we've reached thousands of games. Magnus Carlsen plays the move c5. It's a move literally been seen in maybe less than 20 games. Like, damn it, does this guy not have prep somewhere? How does he know everything about everything? And the point is that it's a free pawn. But essentially what Black will get here is the diagonal pressure, and White just really can't defend this pawn so easily. Probably will lose it over the course of time. So Martinovic plays rook c1 to try to kind of line something up over here, knight c6, then he takes. And I think this position had been reached once before, but this idea to bounce Magnus's knight to b4 has never been seen. And Magnus just very quickly jumps into d3. We have takes, we have a trade of queens, and bishop e6. Why is Magnus Carlsen trading pieces when he's down material? He's down a pawn. White is a pawn up. Well, he's got the two bishops, right? So his bishop is going to come to c4 at will. White's king is still stuck in the center. And Magnus has a super important pawn break in this position, which will basically free up this rook and all the dynamics on that side of the board. Now, Martinovic here plays knight d5. That is the best move. You need to block the light squared bishop and give away b2, but in the process, potentially get b7. So here, rook b1, bishop a3, and rook b7 is probably how white should proceed. But bishop c5, of course, there is like rook c1. There's all sorts of tricks here where you can try to win something back. But instead, white plays rook c2. And the difference is that in this position, it looks like the bishop is trapped, but it's not. Danger levels. Look at this beautiful move, f5. I know I just told you about it, but it's more beautiful when you see it up close. Because if you take on a3, which is what happened in the game, then after fe4, you got two hanging knights. Can't do anything about it. So what do you have to do? Sacrifice for the pawn and move your knight here. Now, Magnus Carlsen's just a pawn up. He went from a pawn down to a pawn up. Like that. Snap the fingers like Thanos. Now I'm a pawn up. How are we going to win this game? Opposite colored bishops, pawn imbalance, definitely piece imbalance. I mean, the pieces are all fighting for all sorts of different squares. So knight c6, totally welcoming a trade of pieces because he understands that the outside a pawn will be very useful in the endgame. Open files for his rooks and bishop, also very nice. And he just beelines for this trade and plays a6. Now, let us see the magician of Norway go to work. Step 1, bring the rook. Step 2, centralize the rook, applying pressure and potentially swinging over here, inducing a pawn move to bring the pawns forward and winning control of certain squares, okay? White plays king back to e2, rook doubles up on the d file, bishop to e3. You want a trade of rooks? Magnus says, on my terms only. Rook takes d3, if you take, I now open up this. And if rook takes d3, of course, bishop b5. So that's not going to happen. Martinovic plays rook back to a1. Magnus says, king f7. Just got to improve the positioning of my king. And now, and only now, when you've given me a weakness, I'm going to trade with you, give you this check. If you play up to e3, I will give you this check, and the game is over, because you have to guard your bishop, and then I will jump out here, discover check, I win the rook. So king has to go back to e1. I still drive in the rook. You know why? Because it can always go here. And now I've opened up the march for my king. And that's exactly what he did. And in this position, Martinovic resigned. Because there is nothing that he can do. If he plays for the defense of this pawn with a move like bishop to e3, that allows a5. And that ultimately will allow a4. Now that pawn has gotten 2 squares closer, and white's position hasn't improved whatsoever, and he will suffer a very slow, torturous death, at which point Magnus will sack the rook for the bishop and will promote the pawn, resulting in a bishop advantage. Magnus Carlsen made that look so simple, I want to vomit, but I can't because I'm recording and then I would need to edit the footage out. That would not be very good. Next game that I would like to show you is this game between Ariban Baskaran and Nuris Delgado Ramirez from Paraguay. Paraguay does not have tremendous like depth in their chess, I don't believe, but they have a couple of extremely strong players. Delgado Ramirez, they have Axel Bachmann, they have Guillermo Vasquez. I really hope I'm not forgetting someone super famous, but I know those 3 off the top of my head, and if I'm forgetting something, Paraguayans, do let me know in the chat. Now, Ariban Baskaran with the white pieces, nicknamed the Beast. Why? You about to find out. f3, trying to play for e4. Black has a lot of alliance here. Knight c6, d5, c5. What are we going to get? Principled. Let me get that bishop, okay? And black plays c6. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. c6 is a very strange move. I don't know the theoretical status. I know for a fact that black likes to play like this and get really active. c6 is a little bit... I don't know. And Ariban just plays e4. And again, to the untrained eye, that just looks like a blunder of a pawn. It's really not, because white will go here. And you have to give the pawn back. And if you really want this pawn, your knight's trapped. No, it's not, Gotham. It's not. You really want to do this? You really want to play this game with me? I have queen h4 check. Are you really sure? You're really sure queen's gonna get trapped? And by the way, I can do that. I can also take with check first and then do this. But you get what I'm saying. Let's not. All right. Black plays e5. e5 is a very interesting move. Clearly the position is super hot. White is not gonna do this. This is idiotic. The beast doesn't do idiotic things. He only plays very good moves. Knight to f3. Go ahead and take my pawn. If you take my pawn, I play here, you go here, and then I take back. and have a dominant central advantage. So black plays queen a5 going for c3. Ariban doesn't want c3 to be taken, but he allows the e4 pawn to be taken. Plays bishop d3. Come and get me. Come and get me. Okay. Yup. Short castle. Wait, you giving me 3 pawns in the opening? Yes, I am, because all of your pieces are asleep. Queen e2 check, king moves over, knight to e5, knight to g5, black resigns. Black resigns. I mean, I don't care that you're up 3 pawns. Where are the rest of your pieces? You're down like 16 points of material back there. I mean, no. So black castles. Now, any normal person here just takes back the pawn, but his nickname is the Beast. Doesn't do normal things. Plays knight to g5, threatening h7, f5. And here, he plays a sick move. c5. c5. If you take it, well, queen a2. And if king h8, knight f7. And yes, oh yes, we're going for this. You still got no pieces out. This is mate. Queen f8, queen takes. c5, beautiful move. And the other problem here for black is that after king h8, which is the only move to avoid this check, queen e2. Now the best move is actually, I think, queen a2 according to the computer, but they're both fine. Queen e2 to try to go queen h5 because you've just made this king go over there. So now here, if Delgado Ramirez takes this pawn and goes up 3 pawns, then after queen h5, the game's just over. It's over because if you play h6, trying to prevent checkmate, I can just bring another rook. Like, I can literally be down 4 pawns and still be completely winning here. It's insane. Black plays knight d7, and now you got everything set up, prime position, knight takes h7. Opa! If you take on h7 with the king, queen h5 check, king g8, bishop c4, bye-bye, everybody goes home. But if you take on c3, queen h5, queen c5, king h1, black is up 3 pawns, but it's still over because after bishop takes f5, queen to d5, knight back to g5, it's over. This, pick one, pick a win. And he ends it in style. Knight takes, and black resigned. If this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and of course you have to bad manners them, you have to play this. You can't play rook g8, mate. Ariban Bhaskaran detonates nasty chess on his opponent and takes a 1-0 lead in his knockout match. Now, next game I have for you, the game between Anna Muschuk, I believe 5th highest rated woman in the world, and Tatab Abrahamyan, who's Armenian American. I think she's a former US women's champion, if I'm not mistaken. I think at least one time. And this game was insane. Okay, this game was completely nuts. It was 88 moves, so I don't want to spend like 30 minutes on it. It was a Winauer French, which is a classical French with bishop b4, pinning the knight to the king. A lot of this is theoretical. Black gives up the bishop, and white oftentimes will venture out here with the queen and take some pawns. And this is all theoretical, but actually, we don't get that. We get a crab. We get a crab Winauer with a4, h4. This is just modern chess, all right? Pay attention. Bishop b5, bishop d7, bishop comes back to e2. Some sort of mega big brain strategy to not allow the bishop to come out to this diagonal. Okay, fine. Now both sides castle, bishop f4, and black plays the move f5. Now, black plays f5 because obviously you can't play en passant because you would lose your bishop. That's exactly what white does, and then goes and takes the knight. Rook f7, bishop back to b5. Why? Because you want takes, and this. And essentially white is going to battle knight for bishop. Now that knight on e5 is the GOAT, okay? This is the greatest knight of all time. It is defended by everybody in white's position if white wants. None of black's pawns can kick it out. The only way black will get rid of this is by sacrificing a rook for it. So now white is going to just continue to exert pressure. First of all, white has found an infiltration on the queen side, but first stabilizes everything over here so as not to lose any material. Now we have rook e1, because again, you need to reinforce your knight down the center of the board. Rook e3, b5. Black is trying to be first on the queen side with the counterplay, but in doing so, really softens up the structure. Queen d4. Where's black's play? You're not going to get into c4, right? So the rook comes back to c7. Opa. White looks just indestructible here. If you hit the pause button on this position, white wins just by judge's scorecard. I mean, what? The only thing that white doesn't have is anything protecting this. And that's why, you know, it gets taken. But then rook e6. Now, if rook takes c3 is played here, well, rook e8. I mean, your rook over here is not actually guarding the bishop because it's also guarding the rook. You would be overloaded. So bishop f7, rook d6, and king g2, making sure the king is off the back rank. King h7, rook f3. Slowly but surely, it is now time for white to build up an attack. But black just comes in time with this move, rook to a4. Rook to a4 is a problem because queen b6 trying to counterattack is a mistake. White had to go here. If bc4 or any pawn capture, then you would lose your bishop and the game is over, right? So instead of that, if c4 were to be played, black would sack, that was the point, and then bring the rook in, and then take on g4. So we would get this, this, and this, and it's chaotic. But queen b6 allows the rook to come into c3. But now, total insanity happens. Bishop takes g4. There is a rook hanging over here. Okay, that's just a hanging rook. But of course, you can also play knight takes g4. But then there's rook takes g4, queen e4, you get swarmed, and you lose. So bishop takes g4 also blunders mate in 5. And if you'd like to, please pause here and try to find it, because Anna Muzychuk was unable to find it. Checkmate in 5 is after rook takes h6. If gh, queen c7, the bishop has to come back and block, but then you take it. If king to g8, rook f8. King f8, queen f7 mate. If rook h6 were not to be taken back, and instead this, rook f8 anyway, here, queen d6, and if king here, mate, if rook here, mate, and if king here, mate. Insane. Completely insane. Rook takes h6, but black plays queen c7, and after bishop takes f3 check, black is winning. Black is winning. Because if you play king takes, there is a mate coming. Like, you're just gonna get mated here. It's mate in 5, but also you lose your knight with check. It's devastating. So knight takes f3, and now the only winning move for black is queen f5. Setting up rook to g4 check or queen to g4 check, and there's no way to protect it. There's no way to protect it. But black plays this. And after king h3, queen f5, it looks like the position is completely lost. I mean, there is just a devastating threat waiting to be uncorked. Double, quadruple, exclamation point, rook f6. Somewhere they are applauding. And this is actually what Vichy did yesterday to Kramnik in the no castling match. If you didn't see that video, go watch it. Anywhere the rook moves, the queen gets taken. And if the queen takes on f6, then king takes g4 and white is winning. So we get rook takes h4, king h4, queen f6, and now we begin the hunt. The hunt for the king. Check. Here, b4 sacrificing to win it back. Very unclear position. Knight for 2 pawns. Can white win this as black tries to be stable? Okay, queen trade is offered. Queen trade must be a draw. Queen trade. Apparently, on a low depth, my machine thinks that this is completely holdable for black. My machine thinks that this is a draw. It's on depth 20, and maybe it can go higher, maybe it's winning for white, but black decided not to trade the queens. And that's how these positions work. That's how this works. You try to make these decisions in your mind. Do I trade or do I not trade? Right? Am I supposed to trade queens or am I not supposed to trade queens? And when you hesitate for too long, the side with the queen and the knight makes progress in the position. And then that side is going to win a pawn. And then that side is going to advance into your territory and suck the life out of the position. Now, if you trade queens, you are down that pawn, right? So the game went on for a little bit longer. It was a lot of checks, a lot of indecisive play from black. White won a pawn and then traded the queens, and this endgame is a win. And she shows how. She brings the king, the knight, and basically what you do here is you freeze black. You make black run out of moves and allow your king to infiltrate. See? King is infiltrating, and black just can't move anything, and it ends with this knight takes g4. Beautiful. Why is this over? Black resigned because this is a winning king and pawn endgame, and that is how you win endgames like that. Now, with the extra pawn, it would have been a lot harder because that pawn would have been a decoy. And if that extra pawn was over there on a5, total draw. Because the knight would have been, or the king would have been distracted. So Completely insane game from these two. I mean, super topsy-turvy. I completely understand there was time trouble and everything. Oh my God. I mean, wow. What an incredible game. And we have two more. This game is crazy. So Alexei Shirov, one of the... First of all, he was arguably supposed to play Garry Kasparov for World Championship. If you don't know anything about Shirov, after this video, go look up Alexei Shirov's history. He won the candidate match to qualify and play Kasparov. Okay? He won it. And he didn't get a game. He didn't get a match. And now he's in Spain, very strong player, still playing Yaroslav Zherebuk, also very strong player from the States, formerly Ukraine. We have a Slav defense and a slow Slav with e3. Now, b3 is played and Zherebuk, like, just hockey fight Shirov. I mean, you would think finish developing, castle. No. I'm going to move my knight a second time so I can go bishop b4. If you play bishop b2, I go bishop b4, and I'm very happy. So, he plays bishop b4 and f5. And we have kind of a stone wall. It's a stone wall position by black, right? With some pressure on d2. Very interesting fight. And listen, Shirov is not a guy who's just going to castle and be lackadaisical and play a positional game. If you invite Shirov to party, he's going to party. He plays knight to e5, and the threat is queen h5 check. So what does our friend do, Zherebuk? He just ignores it. Queen h5 check, g6, knight takes. If you take, I take your rook. So knight f6, queen back to h3, and rook g8. Wait a minute, who is happier about the loss of the g-pawn? Wait a minute, white is a pawn up, but white just gave black all of this, complete bind in the center, this bishop pressuring, and now bishop c3 attacks the rook. If you just lazily go rook to b1, c5, queen a5, I mean, I'm just attacking you. So Shirov takes on e4 instead. d4, rook b1, and c5. Yaroslav Zherebuk is completely winning on move 15 with black. Like, if you take, you lose your knight. If you don't take, and instead you play f4, well, en passant is possible, but black decides to take on d4, e4, queen d4, I mean, you have arrived. Folks, the only move to not lose the game here. The ultra-delayed bomb cloud, king e2. Black plays e3. Because if you play queen e3, rook takes g2, white resigns. White just simply resigns here. Or maybe plays king f3 and then you laugh and then you win in a few moves. Knight f3. Queen takes f4. And black is up a pawn. The problem with doing it this way and not finishing your development with black, or maybe not getting this knight out of the center, is actually white's king is completely safe. And white has a move here to begin trading off your attacking pieces. Sometimes when you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar in chess, your hand gets cut off. It's really bad. It's really bad. So if Zherebuk loses this attacker, and then this attacker, and then like gets the pawn off the board too, Shirov's gonna be fine. So bishop takes e5. Bishop e5, queen e4. But rook c1. Knight d7 attacks the bishop, so the bishop slides forward. Notice that black has lost the attacker and has not improved the positioning of any of these pieces. It's like the Delgado Ramirez game that we just saw, right? Rook d1. Here, there is something absolutely ludicrous that occurs. The best way for black to play this is apparently to plop the queen on f5 and get the queens off. Queen f5, there is ef5, but there's actually even rook g2 in between move, like this. Then take back, because if here there's rook f2, and yeah, for a moment black is up 2 pawns, but white has completely normal development and will just win back one of them and maybe both. Instead of that, in this position, Zherebuk played the move e5. And he blundered queen e6. It's mate. He blundered mate in 2. Now, he had like 4 minutes on the clock, and it was a really stressful game. By move 20, both these guys had like no time on the clock left. I mean, it was super long thinking, all these calculations. He played e5, Shirov played queen e6, black resigned. Can you imagine? I mean, I would want to set the room on fire, maybe my hotel room, so that I don't affect the playing conditions of everybody else. I mean, what? First of all, I have played Zherebuk like 4 times, 5 times over the board. I think he's 5-0. This guy does not know how to not beat me in a game of chess. Can he do this against me at least once? Crazy, absolutely crazy. Totally insane game that just ends in a flash. Wild. We'll see if he can come back tomorrow. He does have the white pieces, so that's at least the benefit. But the last game that I wanted to show you is the game between Sandro Mareco from Argentina and Jorge Cori from Peru. Peru has a lot of really strong players, and this game really intrigued me. Mareco is a big knight f3 guy, but he plays e4, Cori plays Caro-Kann, and we have the Tal variation. This is in my e4 course. Obviously, Sandro Mareco, a proud owner of it. And here plays bishop d3. Takes, e6. Now, there's a lot of ways to play this for white. He chooses bishop g5. And Cori plays in a way that I did not think they played anymore. So here, normally, you give a check, and then you trade the queens. This is generally how black has played this forever and seems to have pretty good results. Cori plays this. This move allows white to do whatever he wants, right? To just kind of develop pieces, they trade, and black's argument is, okay, your h-pawn is kind of stupid, I control the light squares in the center of the board. Totally fair. Knight f5, knight d7, knight b6, knight d5, like totally fair. In fact, it actually doesn't really look like white can do much in this position at all, right? Black plays a5. a5 is not a common move. Like, it's much more likely that knight b6, knight d5 was the way to go. a5 allows white to transfer the knight to the center, and both players are being hesitant about their castling. Knight b6, the queen drops back to the center. And now white castles. Black plays a4. By the way, this is hanging. That's just a free pawn. If you take on h4, I take on g5. If you take on e7 first, then I take with check. I've actually blundered the h4 pawn in some of my games. Clearly, both players saw this and just decided that it was a little bit too dangerous. Could have been because of knight d6 check, and you can't take because you lose your queen. I don't know, but they decided that this was just not worth taking. Instead, Cori played a4, and white said, all right, whatever you can do, I can do better. You can no longer push your a-pawn, calm down. But black insisted on playing on the queen side, and potentially he wanted queen a6 or queen b5 to trade the queen. Black does have a pretty good setup here. White played g3 to not ever lose that pawn anymore. Black took on g5, white took back, black brought the rook to the center, and white played rook d3. Rook d3 has two ideas. Number one, always double up in support. Number two, join the attack over here if you ever need it. Black goes back to c7. The thing is, if black plays g6 here to try to reinforce and then castle, you sometimes end up with some really nasty dark squared weaknesses. But black just brought his knight to b5 first to try to attack the d4 pawn. White just calmly brought the knight to f3. Now black castled. And Mareco must have looked at this position and went, wait, sorry? Castles? But what about this? See, knights can go back and go forward. When you castle, you cannot uncastle. So now that your king is committed over here and queen h5 is a problem, you have to play g6. But now knight to f6 check. Okay, king to g7. And either Cori missed how strong this idea was from a distance, or totally miscalculated something, because the attack is not over. Knight takes h5 check. If you play pawn takes h5, it might look like the attack is stopped after knight to h6. It is not, because rook to f3. And now rook f6 is coming. And if you play something like knight takes d4 to try to create counter chances, I mean, I'm coming. You might think that you're just in time to defend everything. You are not. Knight e6. fe6. Rook. Look at this move. Rook, are you ready? Rook d7 check. Maybe Cori in his mind calculated something like this, and he's like, I'm safe. But rook d7. Rook takes. Check. Here. Oh my gosh. Two knights down and the attack works. I don't believe Cori missed knight h5. I believe he saw some of this in the future. And even knight d6, which was desperation mode, there's still a dynamite shot. Maybe there was knight d4, he was thinking, missed some crazy idea, plays knight d6, gives away the knight to try to centralize. And the final knockout punch of the day. Remember we had rook f6 earlier? Rook f6 anyway. You cannot take, because after check and king to f5, knight h7, the king will be hunted down and it's game over. And this game ends in a stunning way with f3. Not even knight h7 ideas, okay? Not even knight h7 ideas, but this. And after rook h8, g4 check, black resigned. Because if black were to play this move, double check, queen f4, and we would have ended the game with the black king becoming the white king on e1. Man, that would have been so nuts. And that takes us to the end of our round 2 games here at the World Cup. I mean, absolutely unbelievable stuff. Let's just take a quick look. There were some upsets. You know, there was some upsets. We will take a look now. So Tari beat Bareev. I'm not saying that's an upset. I'm just saying that the 2 Norwegians might play in the next round. A lot of draws. Yeah, a lot of draws. Bakro beat Ravi Haria, the only international master in round 2. Firouzja drew in that immortal handshake matchup. Listen, I just hope the tournament continues. You are more than welcome to scroll on this page. There was one Indian matchup. It was, I believe, Pragnananda won a game against Sargsyan. Prague defeated Sargsyan from Armenia, like former 2700 rated player. Amazing game by him. And a lot of GMs beating a lot of GMs. On the women's side, I like what they did here, by the way, for the women's side. They like illuminated the person who won the game. They didn't do that for the men. Anyway, Karyachkina defeats Mongolian-American player Tohir Jonova. And there were some draws, but most of the grandmasters in this section were winning. Carissa Yip, talented junior player from the United States, won against a very strong player from Ukraine. There's less women competing, I believe, than men. I don't believe this is the round of... Yes, so literally half. So they're already in their round of 32. Some surprises, for example, I think I saw that Jansai Abdumalik from Kazakhstan lost to her, to Bibisara, who's also from Kazakhstan. But you're more than welcome to go to the World Cup results page and check it out for yourself. But that concludes the coverage for round 2, day 1. Unbelievable stuff. We'll see if the tournament continues. I really do hope so. And yeah, folks, take it easy. Hope you're well, and I will see you tomorrow for round 2, game 2. Get out of here.